Welcome to the Thriving Mayor Show, the weekly broadcast featuring former and current mayors who are thriving, sharing their story, insight, wisdom, and viewpoint. Join us and comment on social media as we meet another of the superheroes we elect to lead the rejuvenation of our towns and cities and who serve us all. Visit www.thrivingmayor.com to learn more. Here we go. Hi, everybody. It's Michael Hubicki, the host of the Thriving Mayor Show. It's April 7th, 2021, and this is a pre-recorded episode. And I'm super happy and very honored to have as a special guest today, Glenn O'Connor, who's the past president of the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects. Hi, hello, Glenn. Mike. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I'm thrilled to have you here. And the reason why we're having the show on April 7th is because April is World Landscape Architecture Month. And both Glenn and I are landscape architects and have had long, wonderful careers in the profession and seen some amazing advances and wonderful projects that we both worked on.
Absolutely.
Just before we jump in, I would like to read my honoring of our Aboriginal lands. We will begin this episode by honoring the Aboriginal land and the Indigenous peoples who've lived here from the beginning. As settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Long before today, there have been Aboriginal peoples who have been the stewards of this place. In particular, we honor the ancestors of the land, the Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe Chippewa peoples. This territory is covered by the Williams Treaty. Tatalia Michelle Nahani taught me about honoring our shared community with the land and people, and I would like to acknowledge her as well. So, Glenn, that's the honoring of our Aboriginal lands that I do for my community here. Would you like
Excellent.
to share the acknowledgement that you do for CSLA?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. So first of all, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement, and this is something that we do at all of our CSLA meetings. I'd ask you to place your feet on the ground, breathe the air at your location. We acknowledge that we're gathering today from coast to coast to coast on the lands of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people and their governments. We also acknowledge that the head office of the CSLA is on the unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, and that's currently located in Ottawa.
Wonderful. So, Glenn, I think there's possibly some of our viewers that don't have a lot of experience with landscape architecture and landscape architects. Mm-hmm. We're going to get into that as we discuss the 10 reasons how landscape architecture can save the world, and that's the poster that CSLA has put out for World Landscape Architecture Month. But share with us a little bit about your background, what some of the light bulb moments were for you, some of those aha moments growing up when you realize that there's something special in the landscape and nature ecology and how humans and our natural heritage systems interact and led you down your path.
Thanks, Mike. That's a great opportunity to just discuss a little bit about my background. So I went to U of T. I graduated a long time ago in 1981, so I've been doing this 40 years. But prior to that, my family had moved to Terracotta in Ontario. And we lived on a private road between a wildlife sanctuary and a conservation authority. So I had a wonderful opportunity to access the Bruce Trail literally beside our house and the lands of the conservation authority. I also had a chance to work in the summers at the Conservation Authority and learn a little bit about land management and various aspects of stewardship. Interestingly, I had I was intrigued by architecture, and I actually applied to several universities for architecture and landscape architecture, and I was accepted at both, but during the interview process, it became abundantly clear that really working in the unenclosed environment was where my interests were. And that's how I got into U of T, and I was very fortunate to work with Michael Huff, who was a professor at the time and subsequently worked for Huff Stansbury Mikulski. So it was a great honor to work with really one of the preeminent landscape architects in Canada.
Wonderful. And I love that you talk about stewardship right off the bat. And that's one of the key themes that I think we all take as an underlying principle for ourselves. And when I look at stewardship, I think of three circles.
Yes.
Together with basically care in the middle. It's care for myself, care for my community, family, and care for our planet. And where those three spheres intersect is where we can bring the most value and love and care to the planet. And also, in your description, you talk about the unenclosed spaces.
Yes.
And I kind of grew up the same way. My dad had an engineering firm, and then they brought planners in, and then they brought architects in. And I think they brought their first landscape architect in the 70s.
Right.
And I started working there, I think, in grade 8 in the summers, and coloring maps and drawings of, I think we might have even done a master plan for terracotta conservation area back in the day. And coloring with the pencil crayons and working in the blueprint room and surveying and things like that. But when I thought about landscape architecture and I compared it to architecture, I found architecture was too confined. And I thought, well, let's make as big an impact as we can. And that was the beauty to me of landscape architecture, was it's so holistic. And we think of everything and everyone and all the systems.
I think that's a great point, Mike. And I've always felt that our role as professionals is to try and leave the planet better than we found it. And, that's what I've tried to tell my kids as they grew up, that the things that I was doing outside would improve with age. And hopefully they would be places that are for enjoyment of many people and protection of natural resources and enhancing some of those resources for use by people. So I think we're in a wonderful profession where we have that chance to work in unenclosed space, but also leave something that grows and improves every year and looks better as it ages. Maybe not like us, but certainly the landscape ages more gracefully, perhaps.
Yeah, and it continues to as it does age. It's increasing in its value to our environment as well. And we'll get into that as we talk about some of these 10 reasons for landscape architecture. So, Glenn, when you were the president of the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects. Now, I believe that was pre-pandemic, was it not?
Correct. Yes.
Right. So were you able to represent Canada abroad, kind of on an international stage, and share with the world some of the wonderful landscape architecture projects we have and landscape architectural talent that we have in Canada?
Yeah, great question, Mike. So this is my third year, and last year, so I was the president-elect of this Canadian Society of Landscape Architects, the president for 1 year and the past president now. Okay. And my term will end at the annual meeting this year. But I did work internationally for the last 7 years, and I had a chance to see a lot of different countries and visit a lot of places and see a lot of people. And the one thing that I learned is that landscape architects from North America are highly respected internationally. And that's something that really was driven home, when I was traveling in Asia or Latin America, or even North America for that matter, in Europe. And landscape architecture in North America, and landscape architects in particular, are understood and are very highly regarded. And it was often an easy door to open.
Right.
And domestically, during the first year, we made a trip to Ottawa, and we've connected with a lot of MPs. And we really had a wonderful opportunity, Mike, to talk to many MPs and to bring an interesting message. And the message that I'd always tell them is, we're not here to ask you for something. We're not here to ask you for money. We're here to offer our help, knowledge, and experience. And it was always a really nice moment where, as a professional and representing over 3,500 members from across the country, we could say to them, we're here to offer you our knowledge, and they would readily take us up on it.
Wow.
They would seek our input, and they would ask us, well, how can you help us? And we would talk about, with different portfolios and different ministers, some of their issues and what their constituents were facing, and some of those issues across the country, Mike, that landscape architects were able to help with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a couple opportunities to work abroad as well, and it's so much fun. The one project that I still recall so fondly was designing a ski resort village in the high Atlas Mountains east of Marrakesh.
Beautiful.
Which you'd think wouldn't be feasible, but it actually had the highest chairlift in the world for, I think, over 50 years. But it only snowed twice. All that snow had to last through the ski season, and nothing came of the project, but it was still a wonderful experience, and we were able to, as landscape architects, come into that project with the client and the stakeholders, and kind of turn the tables from a development perspective to a conservation.
Excellent.
Perspective, and working with the indigenous at that time. There were Berbers, Berber people that were very nomadic and moving their sheep through the landscape and whatnot. But it was a fantastic experience.
Wonderful.
Really loved it. Yeah. What's one of your favorite past international projects?
Oh, well, we did a very interesting project when I was with Forec. We worked in Shenzhen on a really fascinating project that was really a new town, and it had a lot of different entertainment aspects. But what was unique about it is we had the opportunity, Mike, to lay out the town, think about the integration of residential, recreation aspects, retail, commercial, and all of our entertainment facilities. We had an indoor snow park, indoor water park, outdoor water park. We had a technical museum and all sorts of different things. But it was absolutely fascinating. And at the end, one of the highlights, I think, for me was presenting it on their national TV on a format similar to a TED Talk. And I remember we were asked to prepare for 15 minutes plus 15 minutes of translation. And I thought that seemed like a massive amount of time. So we went to a lot of effort, and our team helped and pulled together some beautiful imagery and materials. And a couple of days before we were leaving, they said it's going to be a bit shorter and we'll let you know. So, okay, that's fine. And we prepared. And the night before, they said we need it to be 7 minutes, including translation.
Wow.
And I remember scrambling, and we had a wonderful staff person there who was fully bilingual. And I said, I need a couple of hours just to rip this presentation apart and put it back together. So I think what was interesting about that for me is we distilled all of these ideas from months and months of work, almost over a year of work, into 7 minutes, was really 3.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I remember practicing with her 10 times in the lobby of the hotel. And I would go through the slides, and we had it so it was very smooth and animated, and we would exchange back and forth. And we get up on this massive stage, and the screen was 8 or 10 meters high and 15 meters long, and 2 giant columns. And we were these little people on the stage with microphones. And all in the front row were leather chairs, and that's where all the national members sat. And then there was hundreds of people, and it was dark, and we just had the spotlights on us, so we did it. And I remember them all standing up and clapping and cheering and bowing, which was very unusual.
Yeah.
And So that was kind of an interesting highlight of working with many, many people, local and international disciplines, because our team was international, and pulling together something that would be quite exceptional, and it's being built now, and it's a seaside community, and so I think that was quite an interesting project.
Yeah, that sounds great. And again, it because it was a new town, you basically could design round up however you like, and consider all of the aspects of culture and recreation and nature, ecology, natural
Absolutely.
systems, transportation,
Yes.
Central heating, things like that, which is really amazing.
It was fascinating.
Yeah, that's a beautiful project. So Glenn, what do you say we jump into our 10 top reasons?
Great.
And these aren't our top 10 reasons. We just love to talk about them, and they came from the CSLA. And the number one reason how landscape architecture can help save the world is keep your cool. We can help counteract climate change.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one. And I think for all of us, Mike, the climate, the whole climate issue really has come into focus in the last few years. And what's quite interesting for your viewers to know and to learn, actually, is that the CSLA and our profession have been very actively engaged on climate issues and the impacts of climate and weather, both in Canada and more so internationally now.
Yeah.
We have a CSLA's Committee on Climate Adaptation, and we've become advocates for emission reduction, carbon sequestration, and adapting to really a changing world. And in fact, CSLA and their members have led international climate initiatives through what's called the International Federation of Landscape Architects, or IFLA.
Okay, yeah.
So the CSLA is a member, but I'm very proud to say that several of our very prominent and preeminent members are leading those efforts. And absolutely, landscape architects can make a difference. And not only internationally looking to Canada, but the US is looking to us because we've really started to make some major advances as a community.
Yeah, and some of the issues that we're facing in our cities and towns revolve around urban heat island.
Yeah.
So as we start to pave over, have more impervious surfaces, there's less groundwater can be absorbed. Those hard surfaces, especially black asphalt, absorb the heat, don't reflect as much of the heat. One of the fun scientific aspects that I encountered a fair while back was evapotranspiration. And that was, I think we were talking about a landfill or a brownfield site in a city, and we'll talk about that in one of the other reasons. But the ability of plants to absorb toxic material or elements, and then to take them, process them, and then turn them into byproducts that we need to sustain the earth. Which, we don't really think about trees and plants like that, but they're part of the living system, the lungs and the purification system that allow us to thrive in our urban centers.
Absolutely. The one thing I remember early in my career, an engineer telling me, and I had to think about it for a while. When he said it, it seemed obvious, but I had to give it a lot of thought, Mike. He said, there are no new drops of water on the earth. The water that's been here for billions of years is the same water that we'll have tomorrow and in another billion years, and it moves around. And I thought about it for a while, and I thought, yeah, it's an interesting notion when you think of the hydrology cycle when we were in grade school and we did the little cartoons of the clouds and the circle going up and the raindrops coming down and a little arrow in the ground. And I thought, it was a really simple statement, but it made me stop and reflect and think about that drop of water. That there are no new drops of water.
Yeah. Reason number 2, landscape architecture can help save the world, is hands off. We help protect cultural and landscape heritage sites.
Right. Yeah, that's a great one. And our profession has for quite some time been really trying to bridge the gap between the built and the cultural environment. And in 2017, for example, the CSLA recommitted our members to advancing through their own practices and planning and design principles of resilience and transformation and sustainability. And this was expressed through we put out a position paper on resilient, transformative, and sustainable, a positive approach to changing the future. And I think what the listeners need to think about is how can we balance the protection of these cultural and heritage landscapes, and how can we work together? And we, right across the country, are working with our members and with politicians and closely aligned to really look at those. And there's a lot of great opportunities. So,
yeah. One of my favorite projects in this area was working with the Hiawatha First Nations, just on the north shore of Rice Lake. And it wasn't a town. It was obviously a ancient town. It was, but at Serpent Mounds was a burial site for one nation, and it was the Ontario Parks had created a campground there, which then Hiawatha First Nation acquired, and they were running it as a park. And they asked us to come in and do a master plan and really be very, very careful about the heritage site of the burial mounds. And there was the old area where they would put all of their waste was a lot of shells and things like that was on a shoreline. And that also, we made sure that we protected it, and it was a really interesting project. Yeah,
fascinating.
And we see in our cities and towns that the layers of archaeology, of culture and archaeology, and in our profession, we're often tasked as the first, us in archaeology, to come in as the first professions to identify and protect those resources, and then the other,
and learn to tread lightly.
Yeah. Our third reason why landscape architecture can help save the planet is go wide. We help champion parks and open spaces.
That's a great one too. I like that one. For almost 100 years, landscape architects have been at the front line decision making and thinking about ways to protect vulnerable ecosystems and enhance our natural systems. These scales can work from regional scales down to single family sites or smaller sites, and creating public open space or suitable places for public enjoyment and use, festivals, social interaction, and things that promote neighborhoods and are supportive systems. And I think for all of us in the last year, we probably have seen this more than ever, Mike, where we're all getting outside more. And we're learning more about our cities and the places where we live and our natural systems. And the popularity of those open spaces is evident, every day in our lives. And I think what we're all starting to appreciate is how important and critical those open spaces and public facilities are.
Yeah, a lot of our projects that both you and I have worked on were the reclamation of brownfield sites, and so many of our towns and cities along our lakes, and we have a lot of lakes here, had railways that went when we started settling, and those railway lands left a real blight. And some of my favorite projects were coming into municipalities and working with the mayor and council and staff, the stakeholders, sometimes even the rail yard, or if there was a tank farm left over, how are we going to reclaim that land? And then turning it into, beautiful, highly accessible, year-round, fun, highly animated and dynamic new public realm and park space. So those are really wonderful opportunities. And I've noticed as well that during a pandemic that we can't get away, and gyms are closed, and we're finding ways to exercise outside. And I think this summer we may find that we're going to see a lot more people gardening.
Yes.
and growing their own vegetables either at home or in small eco plots and eco gardens and things like that. So another great way for the community to come together, and social distancing, of course, but
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, really
Absolutely.
reason 4
Mm-hmm.
that landscape architecture can help save the world is get out. We
Yes.
open the door to the natural world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the benefits of our contributions and the projects that we all work on, and really contributing to the well-being of both human health and the ecosystem. And I think what landscape architects have that's quite interesting is that experience and knowledge where they can combine nature-based solutions and reduce the impact of changing environments, but also improve community resilience and transform the way that our society can enjoy those spaces. And I think, again, this is something that I think has been really highlighted in the last year or so, and the importance of these spaces for public enjoyment, but also for our mental health and our well-being and our physical well-being. And I know for myself, I'm making an effort to get out, and my wife and I go for a walk every night. And I think, I'm walking with a colleague who I worked with for many years, a dear friend, and we've been walking the city. And I live in Toronto, and I'm learning about the city that I live in places that I've driven by that I would be embarrassed to say I didn't know. And I'm excited, on the other hand, like a little kid, to go and see places that, I've driven past but never walked through. So I think for all of us, just getting back to the natural world and walking our ravine systems and creeks and getting to wherever the country is, or getting to nature, can be near city as well.
Yeah. And I love the way you put that too, Glenn, that as a professional, but also as a human, you're discovering these new landscapes. And we're trained to look at things through these different glasses, these different lenses. And we see things where other people don't see them, opportunities, beauty, nature, heritage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also like that quite often we're the profession who's called to make the presentation. Can you explain, like in China, can you explain this project? Because landscape architects take a holistic view and integrate every single stakeholder and topic expert into the conversation, all on equal footing.
Yes.
Because everything has to function in balance. Really wonderful observations. Our 5th reason why landscape architecture can help save the world is inhale deeply. Our designs help keep the air clean.
Yeah, and that's a topic that has been, for the last few years, really getting greater attention as it needs to be. And I think for me, landscape architects have long been leaders in green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. And we look to softer solutions where engineering can work, but other nature-based solutions can work even better. And oftentimes these have ancillary benefits of greenhouse gas reduction and the ability to assist communities in becoming more resilient to climate impacts, but also ensure the sustainability of our natural assets. And I think that's something that we all need to really give some thought to. And with many factories being closed for periods of time, we did, of course, see reductions in air quality emissions. But I think we also had the chance to step back and think a little bit about, when we have that opportunity, can we use natural solutions to solve, whether it's stormwater issues or erosion issues, or provide additional shade in cities.
I also like to frame it in the mindset of, if we build it, they will come. I'm thinking about bike lanes on streets.
Yes.
And we had a project where we took 11 kilometers of a street and turned it into a linear park, basically. So we took the cars away, which were causing pollution, wear and tear, and particulate in the air, and gave people the opportunity to walk, to stroll, to congregate, gather, ride their bikes, where once it was purely an automobile domain. So it was, and I can't take credit for it,
Mhm.
but we were part of the team that helped to move it forward, so that when people ask what's the cost, the benefit, pros and cons, we could very clearly and in an interesting way explain to people what the benefits were. And I find that really, really exciting, really rewarding.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The number 6 reason why landscape architecture can help save the planet is safety first. Safer cycling and pedestrian environments. Oops, I jumped the gun on this one.
No, I think that's a great segue. And your comments are spot on. And I think that, many of the projects that our members are involved with, and you and I have been involved with as well in active transportation solutions, both for the urban and suburban and the rural communities, and how do we connect those places where we can make both cycling and pedestrian environments safer. And I think, again, some of these issues have really been highlighted again in the last year, and I've noticed an increase, of course, as we all have, in new cyclists, and whether they're small and they're learning to ride, or they're larger and they're remembering to ride. I think what we have to realize is those systems need some care and design and thinking to be able to operate safely and operate at a much higher capacity than they had been historically. And I think that's where we're learning to adapt our systems to, as you say, operate at higher levels. And there's lots of great examples where this is happening in our cities and towns.
One of our previous guests on the show was David Feehan.
Okay.
And David is an expert in downtown urban revitalization. And he has written a book about how downtowns can better position themselves to serve females, the female shoppers and visitors, and just in general make it safer, more convenient, more comfortable, more secure for women to be downtown. And another aspect that we quite often don't talk about, we naturally, intuitively do it, but it's CPTED, it's crime prevention through environmental design. That we're kind of the profession that inherently integrates this into our planning, design, and implementation. And it's another criteria that we kind of judge our project development by. That if we see that, oh yeah, that looks like it might be a security issue, say a mass of shrubs that are too high that block a view from the street and create an unsecure place, then we'll identify that very quickly, or go in and do an audit in a park or a trail system, something like that.
I think that's where some of our training has come into play over the years. And as you say, we do some of those things intuitively or naturally, and along with barrier-free design and making places safer for all ages, whether you're young and shuffling, or you're elderly and you have some mobility challenges. I think we do a lot of those things very well, and I think it's coming from our training and also our experience.
Yeah. Number 7 reason that landscape architecture can help save our world is it's alive. We're returning vitality to cities and towns.
Absolutely. And I think this is where landscape architects are developing more sustainable and resilient towns and cities, whether they're urban contexts or more rural. We're looking at the integration of transportation systems, parks and public squares, forestry, ravines, and energy, water use, and all of those issues that go together to form these places where we live. And really creating a greater sense of pride of place and community, and bringing that energy and life back to the places where we live and recreate and work. And I think that many of our members and landscape architects across the nation have had that opportunity to really try and enhance those systems.
Yeah. And then when I think of this, it's alive. It's what sustains us, what helps keep us alive. It's our food.
Yes.
And our urban places, cities and towns are a little bit now helping us to grow some food. But I think in the future, it's going to be a much more important and valuable resource that we're going to be able to take advantage of, and perhaps have to take advantage of, is how do we integrate urban agriculture into our cities and towns. And it's not just to have the local food for local residents and make that food more accessible, but also to engage people as people are working less, are not going to the office, having more free time. It becomes a social, interactive networking and community building exercise as well, which is also super powerful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Number 8 reason why landscape architecture can help save the world is go with the flow, stormwater management.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, and I've had the chance in my career to have to work on, I guess, over 100 facilities and stormwater facilities, and this is one that goes back to that thinking of the raindrop for me, and keeping our rivers healthy, and thinking about how erosion can be controlled and sediment plumes into our lake systems, and whether it's coming from rural or city areas or the runoff from our roads. But how do we control that sediment and integrate it into a more natural-based system? And as you mentioned earlier, Mike, the use of plants, uptake, and sequester metals and oils and separate grit, and using nature-based or natural-based solutions where plants have functionality in the stormwater management system for both quality and quantity control, using those combined in ways that leave a resource behind as an asset for a community, and really integrating those from source control all the way through the systems to end of source treatments. And I think many landscape architects have worked on very successful places that we would look at today and think that's a natural wetland, but it could in fact be a constructed wetland.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah, some of them are just wonderful, and not only effective in managing water, but providing fantastic habitat for urban wildlife.
Absolutely.
Kind of side of that coin, I guess you could say, is we're chatting about kind of the micro scale or the stormwater facilities, is the macro, and rising water levels and things. And I've grown up on Lake Ontario my whole life, and in 2017 and 2019 we had the highest water levels almost in recorded history. I think 2019 was the highest.
I believe so.
And the Lake Ontario, the waves were lapping up against the exposed bluffs of people's backyards, and people were losing 5, 10, 15 feet of their backyards in a year. And some were calling me as a landscape architect. What do we do? And which that's a really tough challenge. It's a coastal engineering challenge.
Yes.
But we can work with an coastal engineering solution and come up with one that's makes more sense ecologically, and maybe with some fish habitat included in it as well. But again, we all have to be very, very aware of what's happening on the planet.
Yes.
And we can deal with the micro or the macro level as well, which is really rewarding.
And I think we all have to remember that nature doesn't need people to survive, but people need nature to survive.
Great point. Number 9 reason why landscape architecture can help save the world is clean up your act. We help with site rehabilitation and site remediation.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one as well. And, you know, I think some of the, I'm thinking site remediation or brownfield sites, for example, cleaning up old industrial areas for adaptive reuse for a new purpose, whether it be green space or residential or other facilities, and using solutions which are nature-based and more resilient, quite frankly, including habitat restoration projects, and looking at those areas for conversion and looking at bioremediation or using plants to treat, let's say, an area that was petroleum-based, and ways that we can use plants to sequester those products. And so I think that's, yeah, we have a very interesting cross-section of things for sure.
Yeah, I've had a few projects over the years where a developer would come in and say, yeah, I bought this land, or I'm going to buy this land, and I want to do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
and this is where we combine science with art. As we say, well, we've got to look at all the different aspects of it. And, you know, Ian McHarg's process of layering the different characteristics of the site. And, you know, one of them could be, are there contaminants?
Yeah, true.
Soil, where's the bedrock, and the water table, and the nutrients, and then the wildlife, the vegetation, how does the water flow, where's it going to flood? All of these things, so that when we get into these projects, there's never a simple answer. And we're given the methodologies and the tools that we can then, you know, work as part, almost the quarterback of the team.
Yes.
You know, bring us your professional opinion, and that professional opinion, and your technical documentation, and we'll put it together in our mapping and identify opportunities and constraints, and which again, it's a really exciting part of the project to see where when you first start, you think, oh, we could do almost anything anywhere, but in actuality, you can't, and you shouldn't. Yeah. Number 10. The number 10 reason why landscape architecture can help save the world is come one, come all, creating gathering spaces for communities to connect.
I think this is a nice one for the listeners to think about. And how do we connect larger public open spaces, you know, whether we're using ravines to connect those, or trail systems, or parks, or other open space networks. And there's a lot of great examples across the country. And these can range from very small scale, you know, green roofs and streetscapes, projects in the cities, or living shorelines. But it also could include other green infrastructure projects where we are having larger issues, you know, to manage greenhouse gases, or manage urban runoff, or rainwater, or improving water and air quality. But I like this one, thinking about connecting communities, and if we think about some of our cities where we have an abundance of ravines or natural systems, for example, and how do we connect those to places where people want to be, and making sure that we have public access, whether it's a waterfront or ravine system or public parking. So this is a really nice one that I think a lot of the listeners can relate to.
Yeah. And coming, like, what pops into my mind as well is other opportunities. In Toronto, we have a lot of back lanes.
Yes.
And back lanes are almost urban micro ravines that you know we could use to connect. Although there's again the septed potential that people's private property has to be protected. There's a wonderful boardwalk in Coburg, and it goes, the town is built in, and they've acquired easements across people's land, and a lot of the properties there go to the water's edge and in.
Okay.
But these landowners just said, yeah, like I want people to enjoy it. And in some instances, they've said, no, we don't want the public across it, and the boardwalk ends and zigzags back up to the street. But those are the challenges, I think, that we as landscape architects can take on and champion.
Yes.
and to help the people that maybe they don't have that same vision
Yes.
that the mayor has, or the director of planning and parks, or a resident.
Yeah.
It could be a resident association that just says, we really want to build this ecology garden, but we don't have any land, or we want to build a boardwalk or a ravine system, or the bird nesting sanctuary kind of thing. And landscape architects, I think, are ideally suited to take a nugget of an idea,
mm-hmm.
and to then see that through the germination, the design and planning and implementation. So really, really fun. And another aspect that I really like about coming together again is creating these outdoor spaces where people can come and gather. And we're seeing now, even in the winter,
mm-hmm.
there's outdoor curling, there's outdoor skating, there's outdoor, you had mentioned indoor ski or snow facility, things like that. But there's just so many ideas and opportunities to be creative for, especially in our winter climates. We this winter was great for getting out. There wasn't an awful lot of snow. It wasn't overly cold, but at least here where we live in Bay Quinte, it was a nice winter for being outside. Yeah, so those are the 10 reasons why landscape architecture can help save the world. And really appreciate your insights, Glenn. This is really a fun conversation. Would you share with us a little bit, Glenn, about how people that are thinking about maybe landscape architecture as a profession, a career, might go about now next steps, and then maybe share a few of your thoughts to our mayors and our municipal councils, elected councils, and put a good word in for us landscape architects.
Wonderful. So I would say to students or younger people that are thinking about this as a profession, to me, it's the way of the future, and this is the century for our profession, quite frankly. And in your career and mine, in this time that we've been practicing over the last 35, 40 years, there's been a lot of changes. But I think for a new person coming in, what I like about landscape architecture is it brings together the opportunity for a lot of thought, bringing together disciplines and really understanding systems and natural systems working with people. And it's really the interface of those two things, natural and man-made systems, that we are very good at balancing. So for anybody that's interested, there are a lot of good resource materials. There are schools right across North America. We have a number in Canada, 7, I think, currently, and spread across the country. So if you look up the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects or the Ontario Association of Landscape Architects, for example, we have a lot of great resource material on the websites. They can look up the universities or colleges. They can look up the American Society of Landscape Architects, or the SLA. So there are many, many opportunities for students to participate. And I've had many students over the years that were thinking of entering the profession contact me or reach out. And I would encourage anybody to reach out to a member. Our members are very open and friendly. And I know you've had lots of students approach you, whether they're in one profession or they're in one academics train, they may be thinking of changing. But go and meet some people. See what we do, talk to people, get excited, learn about what makes us tick, and I think it'll really start to excite some of those students, and they may be changing professions or they may be changing their college or university programs. But I think what they would realize is we offer a bridge between many other professions, whether it's planning or forestry, architecture, landscape architecture, and the way I would simply paraphrase it is thinking about unenclosed versus enclosed space.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Glenn. It's for me, over the 40 years, it's been a wonderfully rewarding experience, and get to meet really interesting people with interesting problems,
Mm-hmm.
and create even more interesting solutions for the opportunities that we discover together.
Yes.
And that's a really beautiful part of the profession, is this exploration and discovery, but then building. I was driving through Coburg, which is where I actually did a project in high school with a licensed landscape architect, and it was a park walkway system and a couple of planters, and they're
Nice.
still there.
Fantastic.
I think that was 1979.
It's nice to be able to go by those.
Yeah. It really is, and people still enjoy them. So Glenn, again, thank you so much for sharing your wonderful insights. We'll post up the CSLA and OALA website addresses in the show notes, and look forward to continuing our discussion on some of the initiatives we're working on together. And thank you again so much.
Great, Mike. Thanks so much. And just one final message for the mayors and the listeners. A quote from Pierre Elliott Trudeau from many years ago: "Leaders must be leaders." And it takes courage to make decisions sometimes, but making long-range decisions will help all of us. So thanks so much, Mike. I really enjoyed this.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining the Thriving Mayor Show. Make sure to like and share, and tell your friends and colleagues. Mayors are awesome and are the change agents to enhance the quality of living for over 80% of us. Remember what Coach Wooden said: you cannot live a perfect day without doing something for someone who can never repay you. Much love and peace. Until next time.